Hi everybody, I'm making Tembleque coconut pudding. It's a Puerto Rican dessert. Tembleque means wiggly, and it's a creamy coconut pudding with a little bit of cinnamon and ginger. And we're going to sprinkle shredded coconut on the top. So I have these cute little containers. I'll put the pudding in here, sprinkle the top with the shredded coconut, put it in the refrigerator. It's got to set for probably overnight. So we'll let it set overnight. When I mold it, then we'll sprinkle the cinnamon on top. So we have, first of all, 2 cans of coconut milk, 2/3 of a cup of granulated sugar, or 4 ounces. I prefer to use the scale to always be accurate. So it's 4 ounces of sugar, but if you don't have a scale at home, 2/3 cups. And now if you look right here, I have a 1/2 cup of cornstarch. Cornstarch is the thickener to make the pudding thick. So sorry, here's our cornstarch, okay? And it's a 1/2 cup. So now I want to get the weight of that amount, so I can always make it the same exact every single time. So here's our small mixing bowl. I'm putting it on the scale, and I'm going to press T-A-R-E, tare. That will make it 0. So we should start off with the scale at 0. So it says 0.00 ounces. So I'm going to pour in the cornstarch right now, and then let's see how much that weighs. And I will write that down on my recipe, and that way I can always be consistent. So that is 2.15 ounces of cornstarch. Now cornstarch is extremely light, so that 0.15 is important. We can't just round it down and say 2 ounces. No, we really need to say 2.15 ounces of cornstarch to make our recipe consistent. So if I'm gonna make it the next time, I wanna weigh it. But again, if you're not familiar with using a scale or you don't even have one, that's a 1/2 cup, a leveled 1/2 cup, okay? So the recipe is fairly simple. We're going to add the coconut milk to our pot, stir it together with the sugar, and then I'm gonna add some of that liquid to the little bowl and stir that together. So I don't have a camera person with me today, so I gotta do all of that. So as soon as I can do something with one hand, I'll show you the next step. So I'm gonna open the cans of coconut milk, put them in the pot, and then I'll start the camera again. The coconut milk is in the pot, and now I'm going to add the 2/3 cup or 4 ounces of granulated sugar. We're just gonna sprinkle that in, and I'm gonna stir it around. I'm using my spatula. This is a heat-resistant spatula, so when it's on the stove, I can stir with it. If you don't have one, you can use a wooden spoon instead. So I'm stirring that together. And then what I'm going to do is take some of that liquid, pour it into the bowl with the cornstarch, stir that together. That's called making a slurry. When you stir together a small amount of liquid into the cornstarch, you want to get rid of the lumps. So that's why you're doing that action first. If you just dump it all into the big batch of liquid, you tend to get lumps. So always do this step. So I've stirred in a small amount. I'm using my spoon to stir the cornstarch together. We want to make it stirred well, so that way we don't get any lumps in our pudding. We want a nice, smooth, silky pudding, Tembleque, and so this is why we do this step. Scrape it off the edges, and just so to remind you, I washed the cans out from the coconut milk and put them in the recycling. Always remember, recycle. So those are over here. You can see they're in the metal bin. Sorry, they're in the plastic bin. That's for recycling. We recycle our cans here. And make sure you do that at home too, so that way we save our planet from garbage polluting our oceans. So, all right, so now you can see that small amount has mixed in. It's pretty thin. There's not lumps. Still gotta scrape some off of the edge. There's some stuck at the bottom. What I'm gonna do is add it back to the big pot, stir it all together. And then I'm going to bring it to a boil and stir consistently while it's coming to a boil. And when that happens, we're going to cook it for about 5 minutes, and it'll get nice and thick. So I still have a couple lumps there, sorry. I got to flatten that out with the back of the spoon and stir it together, and then I'll use the spatula to scrape every little bit into the bowl. All right, so then I'm gonna get this on the stove, and it's gonna take a little while for me to start cooking and heating and stirring, so I'm only gonna start recording again when something's happening. So I'm gonna take a break, scrape all of this in, start heating it up, and start videoing when there's something new to see. Almost forgot, sorry. We're gonna add a pinch of ginger before it comes to a boil. We want a little tiny bit of that taste, and a pinch is just that, a pinch. So we'll sprinkle that in, and that'll give it a really wonderful flavor, tropical flavor of the islands, cinnamon and ginger. All right, so then I'm gonna stir this up, and we're gonna put it on the stove, bring it to a boil, and then I have to stir constantly for 5 minutes for it to thicken. So I'll be back. Okay, so you have to stir. It's been on, like a lowish heat. I don't want it to boil and burn at the bottom and have thick coconut gunk on the edges. So this has the cornstarch in it. It hasn't come to a boil yet, but you can see it's already thickening. And again, I don't want those lumps, so I gotta keep stirring. If I get too many lumps, I might have to use a whisk just to break up the lumps. But just so you see, this will hopefully come to a boil soon. And then I gotta cook it for 5 minutes. So I'm gonna have to stir constantly for 5 whole minutes once it does come to a boil. So that takes time. Now, the one thing you don't get on the camera is the smell. It smells absolutely wonderful. Coconut, yum, so wonderful. I love the smell of coconut. It reminds me of sunbathing and coconut suntan oil that I used to use when I was a teenager to get a nice dark tan. Not that I ever did. I always burnt. I never got a tan. I always got more freckles and sunburn. But I still love that smell of coconut oil. It always reminds me of Hawaiian tropic suntan oil. So as you can see, it is getting pretty thick. So as soon as this comes to a boil, let's see, is it boiling yet? Do you see any bubbles coming up on the edges? Still not. Oh, there we go. One boil, one little bubble. There it is. It's beginning to bubble on the edge. All right, so it's coming to a boil. And as soon as we got a little more boiling action, I'm going to set the timer on my phone for 5 minutes while I continuously stir it so we don't get any lumps. And I'll come back and show you the finished product in 5 minutes. The 5-minute timer has gone off, and here is our thickened Tembleque. You see how thick it is? It's got really, really thick. Also because I kept stirring and stirring and stirring for 5 minutes, even longer than that because I still had to stir it while it was coming to a boil. You'll see it's pretty smooth. Well, there's one little lump. I got to squish that one out. But majority of it is very, very smooth, okay? And that's what we're looking for. We want a nice smooth pudding. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pour them into these containers, which are nice size container. If you don't have that type of container at home, you could put this whole entire thing into one mold and unmold it and then slice it. Or if you have bigger bowls, you could put it into bowls. But I had these in the kitchen and they look perfect to me. So I'm gonna cut this open, sprinkle a little bit of coconut on the bottom of each one, and then I'm gonna ladle the pudding into each one, sprinkle a little bit more coconut on the top, and then I'm gonna put it in the fridge. So I'll be right back and I'll show you how to do that as I go along. Here we have our containers, and you can see there's a little bit of coconut at the bottom, and I'm ladling in the pudding. And I love this ladle because it lets you get it uniform, so I can add the same amount to each one. Just jiggle it in, and it's gotten really, really thick. So I tap that down, help it to spread, and it's so thick it's really not spreading that much anymore, but that's okay. When we unmold it, it'll be upside down, or even we can eat it that way. But before it gets too chilly and doesn't sticky anymore, I want to put another sprinkle of coconut right there on the top, okay? So that way when it sets up, we've got coconut on the bottom, coconut on the top, and when we serve it, if we either serve it inside the container or unmold it onto a plate, we'll then sprinkle it with the ground cinnamon, and that'll look beautiful. So that has to go into the refrigerator and set up overnight. So I won't be able to unmold it or show you it until tomorrow. So for now, I'm just gonna finish this whole thing off, put it in the refrigerator overnight. Tomorrow I will show you how to unmold it and to plate it.